I just stopped here in San Jose, where it's the second leg of the speaking tour. And yesterday I had to meet and greet with the youth and students in the League of Filipino Students, my alma mater. And today we're here at San Jose State University Peace and Justice Center. And we're here with the League of Filipino Students, Malaya, and PAWIS. And PAWIS was the organization that first welcomed me back to the United States, and I was so happy to see it.
Hello, I'm with the League of Filipino Students of LFS, and it's very important to us that Brandon Lee is here to speak with us today and yesterday. But as students, yes, we can learn from books and read articles, but I feel that having Brandon Lee to speak about his first-hand experience against with the three basic problems: imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucratic capitalism, to see and hear the harshness of that reality is very important to us, to push us to fight like Brandon Lee. So, yes.
I'm with Malaya South Bay, and we as Malaya are committed as a grassroots organization to fighting for human rights, sovereignty, and democracy in the Philippines. And having Brandon here is very in line with that message, as we see the realities of what it's like in the Philippines and how the U.S. and the Philippine government being tied together really take advantage of the people and hurt people. And it's really important for us to see that in real time and to hear survivor stories and really make those connections. So we're really thankful for Brandon Lee being here and hosting Brandon Lee as well.
Hi, I'm one of the members of PAWIS, and we're so grateful, and napakinggan namin kung ano yung sinabi ni Brandon, ang kanyang experience sa ating bansa, sa Pilipinas. So ipagpatuloy natin ang pinaglalaban para at least alam natin ang karapatan natin as bilang manggagawa, and tulungan natin si Brandon sa kanyang pinaglalaban. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here with us in the South Bay, and to all of my youth out there, especially those that want to bring back ties to especially our Filipino workers and especially Filipino migrant workers in the area. Join an organization. That is the first way that you get to connect to your community and find ways to help your community in ways you never thought you could by yourself. For PAWIS, we have a legal clinic coming up on May 25th. So if you are a worker that you know needs help with employment, immigration, or housing law, there will be free legal consultation for you there. So if any way that you can invite people, come there yourself, bring your family, and even volunteer if you would choose to. Please join events like these in the area, as well as events that LFS, Malaya, and other organizations that are fighting for Philippine human rights and are fighting for human rights for everyone in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon.
Brandon Lee. Let's give a round of applause for Brandon. It is a privilege to get to MC for the South Bay portion of Brandon Lee's speaking tour. My name's Alyssa, and co-MCing with me is Noemi over here, the Blazer. Blazers on a hot day. Great combo. And Malaya South Bay, we're repping, and Malaya South Bay is one of the three hosts for this leg of the tour. So this tour is being hosted nationally by the International Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines, or ICHRP, and the Justice for Brandon Lee campaign. How's everything sounding? Okay? Echoing? Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right, so in San Jose, we have three organizations that are hosting the event, namely Malaya South Bay, as mentioned, the League of Filipino Students, or LFS San Jose State, and the Filipino Association of Workers and Immigrants, aka PAWIS. A little bit about these groups. Malaya South Bay is a grassroots organization focused on fighting for sovereignty, human rights, and democracy in the Philippines. League of Filipino Students, SJSU, is an anti-imperialist national democratic organization of Filipino students at San Jose State. And lastly, PAWIS is a local organization focused on advancing Filipino worker rights and power here in the South Bay. Thank you also to our venue host, the San Jose Peace and Justice Center. Shout out to Joan and other staff here. Yeah. We love the Peace and Justice Center. A little bit about the Peace and Justice Center. It was founded in 1957 and serves as a resource and action center for progressive activism. So if you would like to donate to the San Jose Peace and Justice Center, visit their website or drop cash in the cash box right behind me over here by the TV. And we also want to take some time to recognize our event endorsers. We have Silicon Valley Immigration Committee, a grassroots South Bay organization that fights for immigrant rights and legalization for all. Let's hear it for them, SGIC. We have NC PASA, the Northern California Filipinx American Student Alliance, which is a collective of Phil-Am collegiate organizations in Northern California. Yeah. We have Kasama, the Filipino Culture Club at Foothill College. And the Stanford Filipino American Student Union, or Stanford PASU. Thank you all for being here and endorsing. And of course, shout out to you all for spending time with us and Brandon Lee tonight. Give yourselves a hand. So quickly gonna run through some housekeeping. Please sign in if you haven't already. There are people with clipboards. Are they in here? Or outside? Well, make sure you find someone to sign in if you haven't already. And please wear a mask. If you don't have one, we will provide you with one. And food must be consumed outside only. Please stay outside if you want more food because we have our AV set up out there. And there's one restroom down the hall over there. If you are heading towards the exit, you will see it. And if you parked at Grocery Outlet, you might get towed. So just a heads up, move your car. And you will get towed. Okay, so before we hear from Brandon, I'd like to invite us to first ground ourselves on why we've gathered. During this moment, when we see so clearly the effects of imperialism, state violence, and repression locally and around the world, it is so important to keep uplifting how linked our national liberation struggles are. Every blow to imperialist nations is a win for all of our struggles, from the Bay to Palestine to Haiti to Mexico. So let's continue to learn about the economic and human rights crises in the Philippines and war crimes committed by the Philippine government and the role of the U.S. government and military in funding these and in supporting counterinsurgency programs. Let's continue to build a movement to oppose U.S. military aid to the Philippines and to defend the rights of activists in the face of increasing political repression. The Philippine government must be held accountable.
And we don't want to forget that revolution really is an act of love, and we're here all today to show that love for Brandon, right? One of the very material ways we can do that is by using our monies, not for funding war, but for funding human rights defenders, and specifically funding for long-term care, right? The story we're about to hear, the experience from Brandon, is powerful and is a testament that he is willing to continue to fight under the face of such repression. But he is still here today, just like we are also going to take up the call. And we have on the screen 2 ways for you all to contribute. And throughout the program, if you feel so, you can scan it now or wait till the end. We do have an ongoing call for a 1,000 goal for today. And right now we have about $185 raised, even before the event began, so that's awesome. So quick math, 1,000 minus 185, 800 something. Like we have 50 people in this place outside here and inside the room today. So that's like, I don't know, like free coffees, $16, $20. I think that is just a small amount, and we can also give more. We know that the struggle for freedom, sovereignty, and to defend and to demand justice takes our work, right? It takes us to link arms and do that. So we'll be flashing these throughout the night. So please consider becoming a sustainer, or if you want to give a one-time donation tonight, it's so appreciated. We also have our care team for Brandon here, so your efforts will go towards supporting the South Bay leg, but also supporting the care for Brandon. Because we care, right?
Yeah, we care.
We hella care for Brandon. So thank you for that. All right.
Flail a lot.
No flailing. All right, up next I'd like to introduce Veronica, who is an organizer with PAWIS. Veronica will be performing Made in the USA, a song by Musicang Bayan about how weapons for war crimes are funded and manufactured in the US. Let's hear it for Veronica.
How could you sleep soundly at night? Women and children cry in fright. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. So shelters crumble and burn to the ground. We couldn't just sit back and watch while innocent lives are buried and trapped under the rubbles of hospitals and schools. Lies are the graveyard of their dreams and hopes. As thousands of bombs fall like rain, unleashed by the Zionist state, and it's made in the USA. Made in the USA. So let our voices be heard in every part of this world. Saying no to apartheid, saying stop the genocide. Stand up for justice and human rights. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. We cannot just turn our back while thousands are killed, wounded and starved, and the Western powers and media alike justify these massacres of all their lives. As thousands of bombs fall like rain, unleashed by the Zionist state, it's made in the USA. Made in the USA. So let our voices be heard in every part of this world. Say no to apartheid, saying stop the genocide. Stand up for justice and human rights. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. Till the dust settles and the smoke disappears, and the blood of the bodies flow. From the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. And from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free.
was amazing. If you weren't cold before, I got a lot chilled, and that was effective in lowering my temperature. Thank you so much, Veronica, for that wonderful performance. All right, now we are going to transition to our main speaker for the day, Brandon. Today's session will be a more focused discussion, a little conversation with Brandon about how he got involved, what motivated him to dedicate his life to the Filipino people, and about the events leading up to his assassination attempt. Then we will open it up to the rest of you for questions. So if you have questions for Brandon as the conversation goes along, we ask that you write them down on cards that will be handed out by Jamie. Jamie is back there, so Jamie will be handing out cards for questions, or you can write them on your phone to remember them. And Jamie will then collect those question cards after the discussion concludes, and then we'll get to them if there's time. But before we jump into that conversation, we wanted to set some more context about Brandon's involvement with the Philippines, specifically alongside the Defend Cordillera campaign. The Cordillera is the region in the Philippines that has been waging an ongoing fight for self-determination against the plunder and profit of multinational corporations and the Philippine government. This video explains more about the Cordillera region and the struggles being faced. So we're about to play that.
The mountainous region of natural resources and minerals in the Philippines and the world. Its pristine surroundings, dense woodlands, watersheds, and rich soils is where millions of metric tons of gold, copper, manganese, and other minerals can be found. Its inhabitants are closely related indigenous peoples, collectively known as ICHRP-US, enjoy Cordillera's richness, enabling them to sustain agriculture on mountainside rice terraces and to develop distinct and interweaved culture and traditions. The great majority of Cordillera's ICHRP-US, with the non-indigenous and migrant peoples, live as peasants, small production farmers, and wage and informal workers. The Cordillera people pride themselves with a rich history of struggle against the World Bank-funded Chico dams and the timber logging project of the Cerro Field during the Marcos dictatorship. And this fight lives on. The promotion and defense of indigenous people's rights, human rights, social justice, and national freedom and democracy endure as challenges and attacks intensify today.
Today's Cordillera is collective with more than 100 mining applications covering more than 900,000 hectares of land and more than 100 hydropower and geothermal power projects. Indigenous communities' voices are excluded as their rights to free, prior and informed consent are undermined. And in areas where mining and energy projects exist, heavy militarization occurs to silence any form of resistance. These violations of ancestral land rights and self-determination mean ethnocide of ICHRP-US and the destruction of Cordillera's environment.
As we see a rise in development aggression, rights violations escalate against the Cordillera People's Alliance, the forefront alliance of people's organizations, environmental, indigenous, and human rights defenders in the Cordillera. CPA leaders and members have been listed by state agents as terrorists, insurgents, and armed rebels in malicious cases. Although these charges have been dismissed, government instrumentalities led by the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict continue to tag them as communist terrorist groups and enemies of the state.
Targeting legitimate dissent and actions to uphold ancestral land rights, human rights, and environmental protection not only violates people's basic rights and freedoms, but undermines their work and endangers their life and safety. health worker Rachel Mariano, and 4 other human rights defenders, was jailed for 1 year due to made-up charges by the military. Leader of Ifugao peasant movement, Ricardo Mayumi, was extrajudicially killed in 2017 for opposing the entry of the mini hydro power project. Before his murder, he was subjected to intense harassment, vilification, and illegal surveillance by suspected military elements. Brandon Lee, a US citizen and Ifugao peasant movement volunteer, survived an attempted murder in his home in August 2019 by suspected state agents. He was seriously wounded and went under critical health status for weeks. Before his shooting, he was hounded by threats and harassment, even in social media. We need your help. Support Defend Cordillera PH online campaigns by creating materials to show the world the Cordillera's challenges. Gather friends, families and personalities to learn about Defend Cordillera PH and the Cordillera People's Alliance work. Organize activities and actions to express your solidarity.
Bring Defend Cordillera PH to your government and state representatives, to civic organizations, churches and international bodies. Ask them to push the Philippine government, the big companies and their funders to stop the attacks on Cordillera human rights defenders and to stop all plunderous projects in ancestral lands.
Raise funds for Defend Cordillera PH. Support the legal battle and grassroots work to amplify the defense of the community for their land, life and resources.
The Cordillera people need you. Help us to strengthen global solidarity to defend the Cordillera against plunder and state terror.
Awesome. Thank you for watching this video with us. And as we continue to process and digest, we will now transition to our main event, a conversation with Brandon Lee, and Noemi will be facilitating this. Again, if you have any questions, Jamie will be handing out question cards, so you can take note of those, and we will get to those afterwards. All right, let's hear it for Brandon and Noemi.
Thank you. Thank you everyone again for joining us. Like we mentioned earlier, if you have questions, we'll have phones, hopefully just jot them down, but there will be a section at the end for Q&A. And welcome Brandon. So we'll get started. My first question to you, Brandon, is how did you first get involved with work around the Philippines, especially as an ally or non-Filipino?
In 2001, the US invades Afghanistan, and I saw on TV what was shown was women and children being killed, all in the name of profit, plunder of oil, and I couldn't sit by, so I joined the anti-war rally. And there I saw a sea of red shirts, led by the Bayan USA, Filipino National Democratic Organization, made up of migrant workers, women and youth, and I saw how powerful their chants were and their organized unity. And in 2003, I transferred to San Francisco State University, and there I was invited to join the League of Filipino Students at San Francisco State. I wanted to learn how to organize the Chinese students to help the Chinese immigrant community. So I also joined the Chinese Progressive Association, helping out migrant workers and those who were unhoused and living in SROs. If you don't know SROs, that's single room occupancy. And those who were exploited for their labor. And that's the time I became an internationalist with the Afghanistan war, with
joining CPA and joining the League of Filipino Students. In 2007, I was invited to the Balik Sambayanan exposure trip to the Philippines. That means return to our homeland. And I questioned this because I'm not Filipino. Why should I go on this exposure trip? And what ended up happening was that my friends were pushing me like, you should go so we can expose what's happening there. We can learn directly from the people, not from this book that we're reading about like Philippine society and why they wage revolution. And I said, okay, I'll just go there one time and I'll learn and then I'll report back the stories. And when I went, we visited peasant communities in Batangas, Taal Lake, where those peasants were, some of them had, their economic activity was involved in tourism. They brought tourists to this volcano island and where they can ride a horseback, but then at the same time, there's this Korean business group that came in and tried to squash their business and say, we have the license here first. And that's where I first learned that there exists a civil war, because those peasants who are landless are fighting for the right to have land. And they've been tilling that land for generations, but how come they don't own that land? So when they fight back, when they ask the state to help them get a piece of the land, the state attacks them. And then I joined the workers' picket line. It's Nestle. And one of the union leaders who had the pickets and shut down the factory was killed. His name is Cobb Ford. He was killed in 2005. And there's the expression, there's blood in your coffee, because Filipinos and I think some Americans enjoy their Nestle coffee, but when their campaign came out, there's blood in your coffee, people started to boycott Nestle. And they made a dent in their profit margin. A significant 15% was cut. Woo! And then with the indigenous peoples that I met in the Cordillera region, I saw, we went on a medical human rights mission where the military conducted a military operation against the New People's Army in the municipality of Balbalan, Kalinga. And there, 4 of the peasants told us that they were being led by the military to look for the MPA camp. But they didn't know where they were, so the military put them on their knees and then pointed the gun on their nape and told them, you better show us where it is or we're gonna kill you. And so many of them cried and peed their pants. And we stayed in this community for 7 days in that fact-finding mission and giving our own people's medical mission. And yeah, that's how I started getting involved with the Philippine movement.
Thank you. I just want to say, I met you at SF State, and I just want to thank you for being one of those organizers that just opened the doors for also folks like me to come in. Brandon was just so kind and warm-hearted, even back then, 2006, right? And that's where it starts. So LFS, you got a lot of work ahead of you. Just not look from learning from books, but going, right? Going to integrate with the people, going to integrate with our communities. So fast forwarding, what motivated you to move eventually to the Philippines and become an environmentalist and human rights activist?
So ending with that exposure program, I came back and with new recommitment to the human rights of the Philippines. Based on all the stories I heard, I wanted to give back, so I wanted to expose more students to the harsh reality of living as a peasant, a worker. Even the students there are fighting for better, relevant education. Their facilities are not good. Their ceiling fans are falling off, and you know how hot it is in the Philippines. It's not conducive for learning. And in that first exposure trip, we also saw the conditions of children in their school when they don't have enough students for one grade. They combine it with a different class, and the government calls that revolutionary education because we cram 2 grades together. But we all know that that's not conducive to their education. So after that report back, I wanted to bring more students to the Philippines, and in 2008, I did that. We went on a 2-month exposure program, and then in 2009, I committed even more. I went on a community integration to Abra, Cordillera. There I stayed 3 months with the peasant community, and I learned about government neglect, how they build bridges that lead to nowhere, and with that rest of the money for that project, they pocket. And then there's also the 3 G's that make it very feudal, and it's the guns, gold, and goons. So in that politics, the politicians have their own goons who carry guns to intimidate people into voting for them. And they pay them off with what you call gold, but it's actually pesos. And on top of that, they allow multinational corporations just to pillage the mountains that indigenous people have worked on for a long time. So when I came out of that integration program, I had just learned about Melissa Rojas. How many people here know who Melissa Rojas is? She's a health worker. She got her master's degree in community health and decided to go to the Philippines on a medical mission in Tarlac, where there are a lot of poor farmers with no access to good health facilities. That's how the government treats the poor. And instead of seeing this medical mission as a good thing, the military decided that we're just gonna abduct these health workers and call them MPA rebels. For 6 days, they were tortured psychologically and physically. Melissa had double cellophane bags wrapped around her head, dumped into the toilet. And these tactics are learned by the US government, who has been training the Philippine military, just like they train Israeli soldiers today. Melissa was only let free because people here in the US, people in Canada, people around the world, and in the Philippines demanded that Melissa Rojas, a healthcare worker, be released. And sorry, I forgot to talk about the trigger warnings. On this talk, I will be talking about abductions, sexual violence, torture, bombings, and killings. So if those things disturb you, you can step out for the meantime, but I'll continue talking about it because it's the harsh reality of what's happening. So not only did I find out about Melissa Rojas being abducted, I find out that Michael Reyes, who was a poor farmer, belonged to a he has 6 siblings. And he decided to join the MPA rebels to fight, to not be poor, so that the peasant can have land, so that they can fight for the resources to belong to indigenous people, to belong to the Filipino people. And in a military operation, Michael Reyes, or better known by his alias called Tarius, gave the ultimate sacrifice. And the people mourned him. But what happened then was that the military said, we're not going to allow his body to be returned to his family. So for 3 weeks, they didn't allow any community members near the body. They said that we're conducting a military operation. And that after that 3 weeks, they allowed the human rights organization, the Cordillera Human Rights Alliance, myself in that group, and his family to retrieve his body. But you know what happens after 3 weeks in the rotting sun? His body was like melted flesh. There's no more skin. You see the maggots all over. And worse, the dogs had already spread his body. His limbs were missing. And this is how military all over the world treats people. It's really bad in the Philippines, it's bad in Israel, it's bad around the world. After that exposure trip, I decided that I want to tell their story because not everyone can hear it. And I wanted to write about it once I went to the Philippines.
Thank you. So can you expand a little bit more about those stories, the region? You mentioned Adra, where you ultimately spent a lot of your tenure, where you lived and worked. Can you paint that picture for us and some of the pressing issues that you came across where you lived?
Yeah, so you saw the video on how rich the natural resources are. There's a lot of rivers, there's a lot of minerals that foreign corporations want. And what happened last year in November in San Francisco, that 21 heads of state came. Does anyone know what activity that was?
Yes,
Oh, it was APEC. Asian Pacific Economic Conference. Something like that. Co-op, yeah.
APEC. Remember APEC, everybody?
So that's one reason why I protested the APEC, because they allow the mining industry to be liberalized, opened up the country to foreign exploitation of the natural resources on Philippine soil. And these indigenous people that have been protecting it for a long time no longer benefits from those resources, including the rivers which the government allowed the building of dams. So I mentioned that the foreign corporation gets 100% plunder from indigenous lands. But when the indigenous people protested, they're met with state violence. And as I mentioned, military occupation of indigenous communities. And what does that look like when the people protest in those communities? They're oftentimes strafed with artillery fire. They're bombed. Like in 2017, the international restricted white phosphorus bombs were dropped in Abra, and in 2023 were dropped in Kalinga, just like how they're dropped in Gaza today. And if you know anything about white phosphorus bombs, they melt through skin and bone and really disables communities, especially the forest, which exacerbates the climate crisis. And this is all funded with our US tax dollars. So when the military occupies the community, they bring with them anti-vices, anti-social vices, like drinking. And many of these military men, they're young, they're married, they have their own families. So when they start courting indigenous underage girls, it's to break up the unity of the community so that the community will debate, do we blame it on the girl if she gets pregnant, or do we blame it on the soldier? This is how the military works, psychological warfare. And in the case of Katrina, who was in Benguet High School, she's 16. She was courted by Captain Danilo Lalin of the 86th Infantry Battalion, stationed in Ifugao, the adjacent province. Well, he gave watches, money, and gifts to her, a new phone. And after 3 months, he switched to her best friend, Isabel. And he brought her to Ifugao, where she stayed for 4 days in a detachment. When she was dropped off in her community, she walked dazed and confused. When she was checked up by the doctor, it showed that she was raped multiple times. And that explained why she was gone for those 4 days. When she and the family filed a court case against them, the 86th Infantry Battalion coddled Captain Danilo Lalo back into the 5th Infantry Division headquarters, based in Gamu, Isabela. And if you know where Gamu, Isabela is, it's one of 9 U.S. military sites being built in the Philippines today. And Gamu, Isabela is landlocked, so they cannot say that the aim of all military bases is aimed at countering China. They're there to train the military on surveillance and counterinsurgency on the Filipino people. In 2014, Christopher Bakay from the 54th Infantry Battalion. The 54th Infantry Battalion actually replaces the 86th Infantry Battalion because they committed too many rights violations that they became unpopular among the Ifugao indigenous people. So Christopher Bakay does the same thing as Captain Danilo Lalo. He rapes a minor, and all he got was a slap on the wrist. When the family sued Christopher Bakay, the military again coddled him in the 5th Infantry Division headquarters. And in 2018, Corporal Paul Tamang, the 54th Infantry Battalion, does the same thing again to a 16-year-old minor. He saw her washing her laundry outside her house and rapes her. 3 months later, he comes back. Tells her that he apologizes, but he rapes her again. And when the family seeks justice, the military just coddles them back in headquarters. This is the justice system in the Philippines, where peasants who file cases against human rights violations, they're the ones that suffer because their cases go on for a long time. It's not just sexual violence either. The US military has a long history of being based in the Philippines. And a lot of their bases, there's a lot of sexual activity that happens where they call it leisure activity or R&R, rest and recreation. But in Around 2006, there was a Justice for Nicole campaign when a Lieutenant Daniel Smith and 3 other companions from the U.S. military rapes a poor Filipina, and the U.S. government ends up paying her so that she doesn't continue with her case. And we cannot blame the poor people. Aside from that, in 2015, trans woman Jennifer Lalde was killed by Scott Pemberton of the U.S. Navy. And he was found guilty in Philippine court. But the U.S. military secretly sneaks him out and brings him to a detachment inside a military base that the U.S. military uses for the visiting forces agreement that was passed in 1999. These are the unequal military agreements that are happening, including EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Economic Agreement, that happened in 2013 under Noynoy Aquino, who many people see as a more desirable democratic, liberal leader than President Duterte or Marcos. But in actuality, all Philippine presidents have been selling out the sovereignty of the Filipino people. And in the Cordillera itself,
so in case you didn't catch it, Brandon was working with the Ifugao peasant movement as a journalist. So a lot of these stories, sharp memory, Brandon, but can you tell us about how that worked as a journalist with the Northern Dispatch and a paralegal with the Cordillera Human Rights Alliance? So, all of these stories that we're hearing, continuing to fight and seek justice for kind of obvious, maybe or maybe not, but we'll talk more about it. Why would that put you at risk as someone who is a truth teller, someone who is collecting stories, someone who is fighting on the side of the poor peasants?
So because I help indigenous peoples and the farmers to defend their land, life, and resources, namely in Timok Ifugao and Lagawi and Labot Ifugao from corporate dams. In Timok Ifugao, they're trying to build a series of 6 mini hydro dams. But instead of compensating the people, they're just giving less than a centavo. And if you know anything about centavo, it's pretty much 1/100th of a penny. Because 50 pesos is already $1. Or actually today it's 57 pesos. But at that time it was 50 pesos. And 1/100th of a peso is 1 centavo. So that's how much they wanted to compensate the indigenous peasant for using the river to generate megawatts. And this megawatt would not help the indigenous people power their communities. Instead, it would go back to the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, which it has corporate taxes, the government does not collect corporate taxes from these companies. And because we gave the indigenous peoples human rights orientation, we're sought after because it means that, suddenly these indigenous people are anti-development. If they're anti-development, it must mean they're anti-government. And this is in the eyes of the military. So if we're anti-government, it means we must be the MPA rebels. And this is how their logic works. And in 2014, the first red tagging on myself happened. But before that, when the 86th Infantry Battalion was stationed in Ifugao, an order of battle list came out where 28 names were listed. And many members of the indigenous community was listed there, and including William Bugatti, who was the human rights officer of the Ifugao peasant movement. In 2014, he openly celebrated a court victory, celebrating the fact that the military lied under oath to the judge's question that they saw that the political prisoners who had never stepped foot in Ifugao was what they accused them of being NPA rebels. And when they were caught in that lie and William celebrated, he went home that night after a meeting in the office, and he was gunned down by 2 people riding in tandem, suspected to be state security forces. Later on, the Ifugao peasant movement nominated me as the new human rights officer, and I accepted because these stories need to be told. Someone needs to make the fact sheets, send it in. And these attacks on the Ifugao peasant movement have been widely documented by Western media, by Philippine national, regional media sources. And in 2015, it was submitted to the Tom Lantos Commission here in Washington, D.C., where they noted that I and the Ifugao peasant movement are being harassed. And in 2015, my mom comes over because she's worried about what's happening. She gets the U.S. Embassy's help, but how does the U.S. Embassy help? They just joke that I should just go back to the U.S. and willing or unwilling, they can just put a rice sack over my head and drag me back to the U.S. so nothing will happen to me. For me, that's why I didn't talk to the representative at the U.S. Embassy, because of those kinds of threats that are happening to the peasants. In fact, one of the first human rights violations that I documented in Ifugao was when the 54th Infantry Battalion put a rice sack over a peasant, dragged them to the police station, made them sign a confession that they are an NPA rebel, a document he cannot even read. And this is happening not just in Ifugao, it's happening all over the Philippines, where they're forcing indigenous people, workers, peasants, students to sign a confession that they are NPA rebels. It is the new tactic under Marcos Jr., where they abduct environmentalists, workers, students, and they ask them to confess. 2 students, environmental defenders, Jed and Jamila, decided that they will sign that confession and have a press conference with the military. And instead of confessing when all the cameras were shown on them, they told the world what really happened, that they were abducted by the military, and their stance was brave, just like Melissa Rojas when she was abducted, and she surfaced. She lived to tell her story, just as I lived to tell my story, because our story is what's happening in the Philippines. To anyone who criticizes the fact that people are landless, that workers are underpaid, their conditions are really bad, and what's happening in indigenous communities, and especially the fisher folks, because under the Balikatan exercises, that means shoulder-to-shoulder exercises, the U.S. government had 11,000 people still ongoing for 3 weeks from the end of April until mid-May. These shoulder-to-shoulder military exercises, they're not only to counter China. Again, they're there to sow fear in communities. They show the military how to do aerial bombings. And they say that they're there to help with the environment. That's not true at all, because just recently they had a mock battle where a ship that was made in China was sunken by multiple US missiles and shot by both Philippine, Japan, Australian, and US naval ships and surface-to-sea missiles. On top of that, the US installs missiles that can reach China's mainland, which puts the Philippines in danger.
So we have about 10-ish minutes. I might have to consolidate some of the questions, but can we shift now over to the experience you had with the Philippine government as far as harassment, surveillance, and eventually the attack on August 6, 2019 when you were shot by the Philippine military. Can you describe that? And then also, how do you view the Philippines government's role in that attack against you? And do you believe that, well, you've been mentioning it throughout your talk, the complicity between the US and the Philippines, the unequal treaties, and how they're working together to have these human rights violations continue. I know that you just condensed 3 questions in one, so whatever you want to highlight as far as like the attack on the attempt on your life, the surveillance, and how you see the government's role.
Okay, as quickly as possible. I was red tagged on social media. This red tagging happened for the course of a year and beyond, but the most intense period was between December 2014 and December 2015, where the Philippine government, through the 54th Infantry Battalion, keeps posting social media memes of us in the Ifugao Peasant movement being linked to the MPA rebels. And in 2015, I received a death threat. It's in the form of the Ifugao burial blanket for the dead. It's just a picture, but it had the California idiom, gray May, June gloom, no sky July. And addressed on that brown envelope, it says Brandon Lee, and every peasant leader in the Ifugao peasant movement received something similar. For me, the address said Dugong Tungod Lagawi Ifugao, which is my address, /NorCal. And people outside the US won't really know what NorCal means, right? Much less those in the Philippines. So military intelligence did their research about me. And in 2015, when I got that death threat, we held press conference, joint activities with ICHRP-US here to expose these death threats. And we had Blue Skies for Ifugao. It's a social media campaign that showed that our skies will not be gray, it will not be gloomy, and there will be skies in July. And later on in 2016, I'm followed from the Ifugao jail to a nearby inn where professors from the University of Philippines Diliman chapter were doing a documentary on political prisoners, and the military van follows me to that nearby inn, and there they just try to observe what we're talking about, and that's their form of harassment. They took pictures of us in the Ifugao peasant movement from outside our homes, from our office, and at Jeep, tricycle, and bus terminals. And in 2017, when one intelligence agent took pictures of us outside the Roman Catholic Church at St. Mary Magdalene in Ifugao, I confronted him and told him to stop taking pictures. And he said he wasn't taking any pictures and left. When we get to our venue in the Cordillera Day in Kalinga, in the municipality of Baobao, they put up a joint police military checkpoint. There, they illegally searched my bag and under protest. And all they found was my clothes and my daughter's clothes. My colleagues were worried that they would do tanam bala or tanam droga, which is the planting of bullets and drugs. So when the searchlight went off, I had to close my bag, and it went off for 10 seconds. It was an illegal checkpoint, which happens often because they're supposed to wear their name tags outside of their bulletproof vests, but they didn't. And more military and police came in. That's why I had to let them search my bag, because if I didn't, who knows what would have happened if we kept waiting. They asked to actually bring me to the police station alone, detached from my group, and I said no. So, yeah, in 2018, or actually the end of 2017, Duterte unilaterally ends the peace talks with the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. These peace talks would have addressed why there are rebels in the first place, why people are fighting for land and better working conditions. But because the military keeps attacking MPA encampments, Duterte decides that he doesn't want to continue with this peace talks. So he ends it. And in March of 2018, as you've seen in the video, indigenous rights activist Ricardo Mayumi was killed. And March of that year, helicopters flying over these communities dropped leaflets tagging Ifugao Peasant Movement, Cordillera People's Alliance, and myself, and members of the IPM as terrorists. And at the end of the year in 2018, Duterte declares Executive Order 70, which formed the National Task Force to end local communist armed conflict.
That's years of surveillance, that's years of just having to put up with that. And you even said, hey, stop taking photos of me, right? And then your eventual attempt on your life in 2019. How has that impacted you now? And what keeps you going? What keeps you resilient to continue the broader human rights fight for all of these violations that continue under extreme fascism, Duterte, and now with Bongbong Marcos? Like, what keeps you going?
Actually, I'll finish off 2019.
Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So in 2019, we received 3 letters from the 54th Infantry Battalion saying they want to partner with us in the Ifugao Peasant Movement. And all those times we denied it. We just received their copy. And they decided that they want to show a picture of me receiving the copy. So I held the letter that I received it. And later on, after the attack on my life, that would actually surface in their PTV, the Philippine government TV, and they would actually red tag myself and the Ifugao Peasant Movement and say, why would they have anything to do with my assassination attempt when I was helping them in their partnering of their projects? So that's their spin. That's what they usually do. And they would say, it's the Ifugao Peasant Movement that attacked me. And that, or I was embezzling, like William Bugatti did, the funds of the organization. And that's why I was attacked by my own comrades. And that is always the military line. But sometime in May of 2019, the Regional Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict in Northern Luzon, the area that covers the Cordillera region, the Ilocos, and Cagayan Valley, they prioritized Ifugao as the priority area to be neutralized. And part of that neutralization includes legal support organizations. That is how I can say with confidence, with all the harassment over the years, that it's the 54th Infantry Battalion. That, and when my daughter gets dengue in May, we're both in the hospital, and they asked my comrades in the Ifugao peasant movement, what is the role that I play, how much money was I getting, what school does my daughter go to? So they're profiling me even more. And then finally, a week before I was shot, in July 30th, they come back and they visit me at home, but I'm not there. They come to our office, but I'm not answering it. I'm with the youth, and I told them we don't have to answer their question. So I confronted them after an hour when we left our office, because they were waiting for me at the waiting shed. That's the area where people wait for tricycles or jeeps to pass by. And I told them two names on why we in the Ifugao peasant movement don't want to partner with them. I said William Bugatti and Ricardo Mayumi. For that 1 week, I stopped going to the office. I was asked already to cover my trail to make sure that I'm always taking the tricycle. And if you know me, I love walking everywhere. So this took a hit on my mental health, because it's like we're hiding, but we have nothing to hide. And on August 6th, I brought my daughter and niece home, and I prepared dinner for my daughter, and I went outside to give the bones and some rice to the dogs. And I heard a loud thunder, and I was hit in 4 places. I didn't know at that time. I was brought to the local provincial hospital, but all they did was bandage me because they don't have the expertise. So they brought me to the Veterans Hospital in Region 2, that's in Nueva Vizcaya, 1 hour away. And they also said that they don't have the expertise. So they said that I'll have to take an ambulance to Baguio Hospital. And at Baguio Hospital, or going there, they said I have to have a nurse accompany me. But there's no nurse that is willing to go all the way to Baguio and then back on their own, because they're on their own time. They're not getting paid for it. So we had to call up my cousin-in-law, my wife's cousin. He's a nurse, but not practicing, like so many nurses in the Philippines. They get their nurse's degree, but no hospital can take them in, so they have to join as a job order, making only 10,000 pesos. But anyways, that nurse comes 1 hour later, and then they bring me to Baguio General Hospital. But along the way, my oxygen runs out, my oxygen tank, and the ambulance breaks down. And my wife joins me from Baguio with the Cordillera Human Rights Alliance. And there they called my brother-in-law, who also working as a nurse in an ambulance. And he calls another ambulance going back to Ifugao to come and get me. And that ambulance decides that they will bring me to Baguio Gen. At Baguio Gen, the anesthesiast was asking, what happened? And I, literally my last breath before falling asleep, I said it was the military. After that, I wasn't able to talk for 2 months. Because of a tracheostomy, I needed to breathe, so they put me into a ventilator. And then I only learned later that the bullet that hit my spine made me a quadriplegic, unable to use my hands, my legs, and I can't defecate, on my own anymore. Like, I can't urinate on my own. I had to undergo surgery to help with these problems. So, but even after the attack on my life, even though I cannot walk or make a fist, I will keep speaking out for the oppressed people of the world.
We will close out. Did you have any? That was very powerful sharing. We can move into our reflection activity. And of course, please write any more questions. That was maybe a little over half the questions we wanted to ask. I know we could talk all night, but we can continue, right? Continue the fight, just like Brandon is continuing the fight in any way possible, right? So we'll transition to our reflection activity, and then we'll continue with Q&A at the end.
So we don't have enough time to do audience questions, but for anyone who wrote down on cards, we can collect them, and then we'll do a follow-up email. So if you have any cards that want to be collected, Jamie will take those now. Anyone here? Or you can write your questions now. So I know we didn't get to answer or hear all of the questions we have, but just after hearing what we did hear from Brandon, how do we feel called to action? Does anyone have any quick words? Anyone feeling any particular way? We were going to have a Slido interactive, but just wanted to get some thoughts. Any words? Shout them out, or I can give you a microphone. One action you can take today: donate to any of our QR codes. Help Brandon. Help us hit our $1,000 goal for today. Brandon's on a speaking tour. We're on the early legs, and we want to set a good precedent for the rest and show that South Bay really supports. So that's one actionable item you can take today. But does anyone have other items that they feel inspired by? Yes.
Yeah, unite together. Unite. There's so many struggles, and it's all connected. We need to connect the dots. So reach out to other groups, form a really strong united front.
Anyone else? Yeah.
For me, joining LFS is a good start, especially having face-to-face, like, or hearing from a first-hand experience. I think that's also a good start, but also even pulling out exposure trips, because that's a good project for LFS. But LFS is a good start, so that's my call to action.
Amazing. How about anyone back there? Any last words, reflections? Yeah.
I just wanted to thank Brandon for coming out and sharing his experience. It was very enlightening.
All right. Well, to the point about joining an org. Sorry, Donna.
Yeah, so, and do events in other languages than English. English is not the only language in the world. So promote people who speak other languages.
All right. So again, one call to action today is to donate to Brandon's long-term care here today. Donate to the San Jose Peace and Justice Center. Donate to all the orgs we have today. And on that note, we wanted to start wrapping up by inviting our endorsing organizations to say a few words. So on the note of LFS, do we have a speaker from LFS giving a little? Let's go LFS!
Hello, we are Danny, Simone, Ren,
and Andre.
And we are part of League of Filipino Students at SJSU. We would like to thank those who organized the event, as well as Brandon Lee, who has committed his life to the struggle of our people for liberation. Woo!
We honor the effort of Brandon Lee to come here to the San Jose community that made it happen, for hosting Brandon, to organize this event, and to you for donating to Brandon's tour costs and long-term care.
We honor Brandon Lee for continuing to commit his life to the struggle of our people and for liberation. He sacrificed his life to fight for the people, even up until the time when the fascist state struck against him. But their attempt to silence him only elevated his story, and that of the toiling Filipino masses, inspiring more of us to fight for the liberation of our people.
Us and the League of Filipino Students honor the struggle of Brandon Lee as one of the many of our homeland and amongst our counterparts who are fighting against the semi-feudal and semi-colonial condition of the Philippines and to bring down imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucratic capitalism. Those who are fighting to build a nation that has true democracy and independence and generally serves the people.
We are inspired to commit our lives to the Philippine struggle for liberation and fight like Brandon Lee. Woo! Fight like Brandon Lee! Fight like Brandon Lee! Woo! Woo!
Thank you so much, LFS. Up next we have Paulis, who is coming up for Paulis.
Maraming salamat, Brandon, for visiting South Bay and having this powerful and inspiring dialogue with us. My name is Ellie, Vice Chair External of the Filipino Association of Workers and Immigrants, or PAWIS. As we are a grassroots workers organization fighting for the rights and welfare of migrant workers. We will be hosting a legal clinic on May 25, that is Saturday from 10:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. If you or anyone that you know needs legal assistance for employment, immigration, or housing concerns, you are welcome to come and get free legal advice. There's also free food and live music. Venues at Holy Family Episcopal Church at Highland Avenue, San Jose. Then on May 31st, in collaboration with other organizations, we will having an online kapihan via Zoom at 7 p.m. The topic is the push by the Philippine government for Cha-Cha. It's not the Latin dance, but short for charter change, which is currently a hot issue in our homeland as the current Marcos Duterte regime seeks to undermine the very nationalistic Philippine Constitution to give way for their neoliberal agenda. Our guest speaker will be Attorney Carlos Zarate from the Philippines, who is a former Bayan Muna House representative in the Philippine Congress. Please look out for these flyers on our social media. We are at PAWIS South Bay on Instagram and PAWIS South Bay on Facebook. Thank you again, Brandon.
And lastly, Malaya South Bay. We have Jamie giving a statement.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie from Malaya South Bay. Maraming salamat to all of you for being here in support of Brandon today. Thank you for being here. We know that we here in the United States play an important role in uplifting stories like Brandon's here. We can take what we have learned today and continue the fight for human rights and to demand an end to our tax dollars being used for the U.S. war machine. The recent passing of a $95 billion foreign military aid bill by Genocide Joe provided Israel with $26 billion and an additional $500 million in military aid to the Philippines. President Marcos Jr. has been ordering bombing and aerial raids on peasant and indigenous communities, as well as extrajudicial killings of activists in collaboration with the U.S. military and using Israeli-made weapons. We in Malaya call for an end to the U.S. military aid to the Philippines, as our solidarity with Brandon and all human rights activists are bound together in the struggle towards genuine sovereignty and liberation. The movement will continue to grow, and I encourage any of you interested to get organized and join an organization like Malaya, Bawis, or Liga Filipina students. We will continue this fight alongside Brandon, and we will win. Thank you.
So, as mentioned earlier, we are fundraising on this tour. The QR codes have been here all night. And we are fundraising for Brandon's long-term care. So given what Brandon has sacrificed to serve the people, as we heard today, and navigating different systems of healthcare and social services in this country, we're asking the community for help. So while we have a place where people can give a one-time donation and every bit helps, we're also appealing to the community to help with support for Brandon on a regular basis. So if you're interested in becoming a sustainer for Brandon or know anyone who would be interested, please let myself or any of the other event organizers know. I wanted to give a fundraising update where we are right now. We're about at $435 of the $1,000 goal for today, which is great, but we can always give a little bit more. And today, it doesn't have to end here. You can donate at any time, sit on it tonight, give whenever after today, but just wanted to start that thought for you all.
And I won't reiterate too much more. Thank you to all of our endorsers, especially thank you to Brandon. Your story has definitely touched and inspired all of us. It starts with that one thing, right? Join an organization, get more involved. We're only stronger together in community. So whatever that community looks like for you, gets you out the door, gets you contributing, gets you motivated. We have to stop this. We have to end the U.S. war machine. We have to continue the fight. Just as Brandon has reminded us tonight, no matter what, we gotta do it. We can't be lying to it anymore. The tone of the world has shifted, right? We can only reach out more to our friends and our family to see what is in front of us and to see the good fight that's ahead of us. And it's fun, right? We have food today. I know it's hot, but we're here in the struggle together. So please continue in any way that you can, big and small.
And with that, just wanted to say thank you again to our endorsers, San Jose Peace and Justice Center, Brandon Lee, and of course all of you for making tonight a success. We wanted to end with a group picture outside. So if we can...
We have someone explain how we're going to do it.
Oh yes, we'll have an explainer of the group picture, so let's go ahead and...
Hello everybody, my name is Mohammed. I used to be an organizer with Enterprise San Jose, but now I'm doing workers organizing. So if I could actually have everyone stay seated for the moment, and then we'll have Brandon and the care team exit first. And then while everyone is still in here, could I actually have everybody stack the blue chairs together and fold up the oval chairs in the back? That would be a lot of fun. Let's do it.
How could you sleep soundly at night? Women and children cry in fright. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. So shelters crumble and burn to the ground. We could just sit back and watch while innocent lives are buried and trapped under the rubbles of hospitals and schools. Daddies are the graveyard of their dreams and hopes. As thousands of bombs fall like rain, unleashed by the Zionist state.
Justice for Brandon Lee! Justice for Brandon Lee! Justice for Brandon Lee! Justice for Brandon Lee! Smoke! Ibagsa! Ibagsa! Preso kapitalismo! Ibagsa! Marcos mismo! Ibagsa! Marcos mismo! Ibagsa!
Stand up for justice and human rights, and from the river to the sea, where Palestine be free, and from the river to the sea, and